Hi, and welcome to the Northeast Asia Cloud and Data Center Summit with W.Media. My name is Jabez Tan. I'm the head of research at Structure Research, here to present on the Japan data center market and more specifically about how the data center construction landscape has changed over time, especially when you talk about core Metro Tokyo to the greater Tokyo area, how data center builds have evolved over time. This presentation is going to be relatively quick, about 10 minutes long, but we're going to cover quite a bit of ground here, talking about the overall market size in Japan as it relates to Tokyo and Osaka. We'll run through some of the key market themes that we're seeing play out across the data center and cloud market in Japan, and then drill into both, the two core markets in Japan, which is Tokyo and Osaka, looking at the data center distribution, new builds, recent investment activity, and then we'll wrap it all up with looking at the overall APAC market and how Tokyo and Osaka fits within that overall growth picture of the Asia data center market. So let's dive in really quickly and looking at the Tokyo data center market size, in terms of how we're projecting it internally at Structure Research from 2020 all the way to 2026. And this is measuring built out critical IT load capacity. And so as you can see, the Tokyo market is fairly large. It grew from just over 750 megawatts in 2020 to now almost 850 megawatts in 2021. And that's expected to even accelerate further and hit 1.3 gigawatts of capacity by 2026. And so you can see that Tokyo and Osaka combined today represent around 86% of the Japan data center market. So the Japan data center market at the top, you can see there is just under 1.3 gigawatts of critical IT load capacity as of 2021. And that'll effectively almost double to just over 2 gigawatts by 2026. And as you can see, the driver of that in Japan is going to be primarily coming from the Tokyo and the Osaka market. So 86% in 2021, and that'll grow to 89% of the total Japan market by 2026. So really, those two are the key markets to keep your eye on over the next 5 years as we kind of cover that Japan market trend. So looking at some of the key themes and why data center capacity is going to accelerate in Japan. It's a sizable economy, the third largest GDP in the world, with a fairly nascent public cloud adoption curve that's expected to accelerate. And so you have the absence of a domestic Japanese hyperscale cloud platform. And so that presents a really ideal competitive dynamic between both the US clouds, which, AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, IBM, and the Chinese hyperscale cloud platforms, so Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, Kingsoft. I think you'll see a really kind of land grab market share type dynamic over the next 5 years as both sides of the coin try to capture market share on the public cloud side, given that there's a huge kind of traditional enterprise base in Japan that's quickly transitioning into the public cloud. And so, Japan is also situated in a very strategic location as an aggregation and distribution hub for submarine cables coming in from the US West Coast and then branching out into the rest of the Asia Pacific region. So it presents a really ideal kind of connectivity location, a gateway location, as well as a large addressable market. But that's not without challenges as well. There's relatively high barriers to entry when you talk about high build costs, labor shortages, power infrastructure build out delays due to the large amounts of demand coming into Japan from the hyperscale cloud players. So, and also kind of the unique domestic business culture and practices that are very unique to Japan market itself. That I think are the key themes to highlight for the Japan market. So looking at the Tokyo data center market in particular, you can see that we here at Structure Research, we are focused on really identifying the subregions within a metro and then drilling down deep into what are the specific dynamics per subregion. So as you can see here, most of the data centers today in Japan are currently clustered around the central Tokyo area. Just over 340 megawatts of that capacity is in the central Tokyo area. So that's Otemachi, Shiohama, Toyosu, where all the networks have traditionally congregated in Tokyo, given it's where the CBD is, where the office buildings are. But as the Tokyo market becomes even more dense and a lot of people are moving to that area from all parts of Japan, that creates a land and power constraint. And so data centers have been pushed further out of the central Tokyo area into initially the West Tokyo area has been the initial hub for the early hyperscale deployments in Tama, Fuchu, Mitaka. from, as you can see from the local Japanese operators like KDDI and NTT have established meaningful presence in the West Tokyo area. And then recently, over the last 2 to 3 years, what you're seeing is a real surge in data center development in the eastern part of Tokyo. So East Tokyo and Inzai, there's been a lot of hyperscale data center builds coming online there. And then I think eventually you'll start to see them decentralize and distribute across other parts of Tokyo, including North Tokyo and Saitama, and then South Tokyo in that Yokohama, Kawasaki, Kanagawa area. So as you can see here from what's been happening historically, so from 2018 to 2021, there's been about 235 megawatts of new data center capacity being brought online. And you can see the majority of that is coming online in that East Tokyo, Inzai, Chiba area. So that's around 68% of that. And then Central Tokyo and West Tokyo have seen a smaller percentage share of capacity coming online there. And then fast forward to how we're projecting new builds coming online between 2022 and 2030. Most of it is going to be in that East Tokyo Inzai area, right? The majority of the market. So 70% of that 500 megawatts plus capacity being located in that Inzai area. What we're seeing also some continued pockets of development, like I said, in North Tokyo, West Tokyo. And I think Central Tokyo will be a smaller and smaller piece of that pie, as there's just not enough land and not enough power to cater for any meaningful data center builds in that Central Tokyo area. So what's been some of the recent investment activity that's been happening in the Tokyo, Osaka area? These are the key ones that we've been tracking and highlighting in our research on a regular basis. You can see there's been an influx of international operators, particularly from the US. So Stack, a US-based operator, Vantage, a US-based operator that has been expanding pretty aggressively into Europe as well as Asia. You see STT GDC partnering with Goodman. They're a Singapore operator that has built a Pan-Asian portfolio. They've also come into Japan, and then existing operators like Colt have also expanded and doubled down on the Japan market. You have the influx of more REIT developers like ESR coming in, Princeton Digital Group, another Pan-Asian operator, and then even new market entrants like Digital Edge, which is, they're angling to be a Equinix 2.0. They're acquiring strategic sites across Tokyo and Osaka and developing their own sites as well. And then you have some really big sizable hyperscale builds coming in from Equinix and MC Digital Realty, as well as AirTrunk in the Tokyo and Osaka market. So no shortage of activity. There's been a surge of development over the last 2 to 3 years. And Osaka is also a market of interest to many of the hyperscalers because it's a fairly small and nascent market. As you can see, it's only about 200 megawatts of capacity as of 2020. With most of that, again, centered around the central Osaka area. But most of the recent hyperscale data center builds in Osaka have actually taken place in the north of Osaka. So Ibaraki, Saito Nishi areas where MC Digital Realty and Equinix and other hyperscale players like NTT have built hyperscale data centers up in the north. And then you have Colt also currently building another hyperscale data center in the east of Osaka in Keihana. And then you have some also hyperscale builds in the Kobe area as well. So we want to look at the Osaka metro holistically, not just Osaka, but as the core kind of greater Osaka metro area that includes Kobe, Nara, and also Kyoto. So as you can see, the historical between 2018 to 2021, most of that data center capacity, as I've referenced, have been deployed in that North Osaka region, with some strategic builds happening in the central Osaka area from local Japanese players that have been able to identify land in that central area. But I think if you look from 2022 to 2030, most of that is going to continue to be from this North Osaka area. The central Osaka number 78 megawatts is skewed more towards the recent ESR REIT development there. And then the east of Osaka, if Colt's thesis plays out well, that is going to be another hyperscale hub, you'll see more and more developments in that East Osaka area in Keihana as well. And so quickly wrapping up, we're approaching the 10-minute mark. Want to highlight how Tokyo and Osaka both fit in our overall APAC market maturity index outlook. So you can see we're the most bullish on the Tokyo market. Even though it's a fairly large market, we still think it's a very early stages, very early days in terms of cloud adoption and cloud expansion there. And so we expect that to accelerate the most, even though it's one of the most mature markets in Asia. And Osaka also, we put that in our opportunity quadrant, which is markets that are outside those tier 1 markets that people are very familiar with, but have reasonable upside given that a lot of these opportunity quadrant markets will end up being, 200, 300, 400, 500 megawatt markets, and even markets like Jakarta and Mumbai and Seoul, we think will ultimately become tier one markets in terms of data center market size. And so really bullish on a lot of these North Asia markets, like Seoul as well, moving in, and Taipei moving into the next 5 to 10 years. So that's it. That's all I had for today. Quick 10-minute presentation. If you want more details about what we do on the APAC data center research side, please feel free to reach out to me with this email address, jt@structureresearch.io. Again, really a thank you to the W.Media team for letting us participate in this event, and wish you guys all the best for the rest of the week. Thank you very much.